June 26, 1944, Villers-Bocage, Normandy. Morning mist still clings to the hedgerows. SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann peers through the cupola of his Tiger I heavy tank, watching the column of British armor moving carelessly through the narrow street below. His crew has been hunting since dawn, stalking the 7th Armored Division as it pushes inland from the beaches. Wittmann's Tiger, number 205, carries an 80mm KWK 36 gun that can penetrate any Allied tank at 2,000 meters. His frontal armor, 100mm of face-hardened steel, is essentially immune to Allied tank guns at combat ranges. Cromwell's, his gunner reports, identifying the British cruiser tanks through the optics. And behind them, Shermans, American Shermans. Wittmann allows himself a slight smile. The M4 Sherman, with its 75mm gun and thin armor, has become something of a joke among German Panzer crews. Intelligence reports describe it as under-armored, undergunned, and overproduced. The Sherman's frontal armor measures just 51mm at the hull and 76mm at the turret face, less than a Tiger's side armor. Its 75mm M3 gun can barely scratch a Tiger's paint at range. Easy targets, Wittmann tells his crew. We'll take them from the flank. Rapid fire. What Wittmann doesn't know, what none of the German Panzer commanders circling Normandy's killing fields can comprehend, is that at this moment, 49,999 other M4 Shermans are either operational, in production, or already delivered across 2 theaters of war. For every Tiger I tank Germany has built, just over 1,300 total, America has produced 38 Shermans. The numbers aren't close, they're apocalyptic. The mathematical equation that will doom the Wehrmacht is already written in production ledgers across Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Lima, Ohio. While German factories struggle to produce 25 Tigers monthly, American plants deliver 1,400 Shermans in the same period. While German mechanics scavenge parts from disabled tanks to keep survivors running, American supply depots overflow with spare engines, transmissions, and track assemblies. Wittmann's Tiger will survive this engagement. He'll destroy 25 Allied vehicles in 15 minutes, becoming the most successful tank ace in history, but his Tiger 205 will be destroyed by Allied aircraft 3 weeks later. He'll receive a replacement Tiger that will break down twice before being knocked out by a Sherman Firefly in August. Because that's what German Panzer crews are discovering across Normandy. Even when you're better armed and better armored, you can't win against an enemy who fields 50 tanks for every one of yours, and whose tanks actually run when needed. The German confidence in their armor superiority stem from brutal experience on the Eastern Front and calculated assessment of Allied tank development. Since 1942, German engineers had been locked in an escalating arms race with Soviet tank designers. The appearance of the T-34 medium tank in 1941 had shocked the Wehrmacht. Its 76mm gun and sloped armor made it superior to every German tank then in service. Germany's response was the Panther medium tank and Tiger heavy tank, both mounting high-velocity guns capable of destroying any Allied armor at extreme range while remaining essentially invulnerable to Allied tank guns at combat distances. The Panther's 75mm KWK-42 could penetrate 138mm of armor at 1,000 meters. The Tiger's 88mm could punch through 165mm at the same range. By contrast, the Sherman's 75mm M3 gun could barely penetrate 90mm under ideal conditions. German test ranges had proven the disparity repeatedly. In January 1944, captured M4 Shermans underwent exhaustive testing at the Kummersdorf proving grounds near Berlin. Oberst Holger von Nida, commanding the evaluation unit, filed a comprehensive report to the Heereswaffenamt, the Army Weapons Office. His assessment was damning. The American M4 medium tank represents no significant threat to our current armor. Testing reveals the following deficiencies. The 75mm M3 gun cannot penetrate the frontal armor of either Panther or Tiger at any combat range. The Sherman's own armor provides inadequate protection. Our 75mm KWK-42 achieves penetration at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The Sherman's height makes it conspicuous and easy to target. Its ammunition storage in sponsons creates catastrophic fire risk when penetrated. Von Neida's report concluded with a recommendation that proved prophetic in precisely the wrong way. The Sherman's only advantage is mechanical reliability. This will prove insufficient against superior German armor when engaged in tank versus tank combat. We should concentrate production on Panthers and Tigers, accepting lower numbers in exchange for qualitative superiority. The early Normandy encounters seem to validate every German assumption. On June 13, 1944, near Villers-Bocage, a single Tiger commanded by Michael Whitman encountered a column from the British 7th Armored Division. In 15 minutes, Whitman's crew destroyed 14 Cromwell tanks, 15 Stuart light tanks, and 2 Sherman Fireflies, a total of 25 vehicles. The Tiger suffered no penetrating hits. British tankers reported feeling utterly helpless against the German heavy tanks' combination of firepower and protection. Hauptmann von Rosen, commanding a Panther company in the 12th SS Panzer Division, wrote in his combat diary after early Normandy engagements, "The Americans send their Shermans forward in groups of 4 or 5, hoping numbers will compensate for inadequacy. It doesn't work. At 1,500 meters, we can destroy Shermans faster than they can close the range. Their return fire bounces off our glacis plate like hail. I've seen Sherman crews bail out before we even fire, simply from seeing a Panther traverse its turret toward them." The tactical reality was stark. In a one-on-one engagement at typical combat ranges of 800 to 1,500 meters, a Panther or Tiger would destroy a Sherman before the American tank could achieve effective return fire. German training emphasized long-range gunnery, taking advantage of superior optics and gun performance. The standard German engagement doctrine was simple: identify target, range, destroy from maximum distance. The Sherman's 75mm gun forced American crews to close to 500 meters or less for effective penetration, a death sentence against German heavy armor. But these individual combat results masked a more significant reality that German commanders initially failed to recognize. While Tigers and Panthers achieved impressive kill ratios in individual engagements, the strategic picture was inverting. For every Panther produced, American factories completed 20 Shermans. For every Tiger that rolled off the Henschel production line, 54 Shermans entered service. The Germans were winning tactical engagements while losing the production war catastrophically. Moreover, the German focus on heavy armor created logistical nightmares that negated tactical advantages. The Tiger Tharoren weighed 56 tons, requiring specialized transport, heavy-duty bridges, and powerful recovery vehicles. Its complex Maybach HL-230 engine consumed 200 gallons of fuel per 100 kilometers, 4 times a Sherman's fuel consumption. A Tiger battalion required a supply train of 40 trucks just for fuel and ammunition. When Tigers broke down, which happened frequently, they required specialized parts that often weren't available. Disabled Tigers were frequently destroyed by their own crews because recovery was impossible. The Sherman, by contrast, was designed for mass production and field maintenance. It weighed 30 tons, allowing transport on standard rail cars and crossing on ordinary bridges. Its Continental R975 radial engine was derived from aircraft engines, meaning thousands of mechanics already knew how to service it. When a Sherman broke down, field mechanics could swap the entire power pack in a few hours using standard tools. Parts were abundant because standardization meant interchangeability across the entire production run. German intelligence tracked American tank production with growing alarm through late 1943 and early 1944. Reports compiled by Fremde Heere West, Foreign Armies West, showed Sherman production at unprecedented levels. But these reports were systematically discounted by senior commanders who couldn't accept that quantity might overwhelm quality. General Feldmarschall Gerd von Rundstedt, commander of German forces in the West, noted in January 1944, American production numbers are concerning, but combat effectiveness depends on armor protection and gun performance, not quantity. Our Panthers and Tigers represent qualitative superiority that numbers cannot overcome. This assessment would prove tragically wrong. The Sherman's designers had never intended to create a heavy breakthrough tank. They'd created a mass-production medium tank optimized for reliability, ease of manufacture, and logistical sustainability. While German engineers pursued perfection in individual vehicles, American engineers pursued adequacy in mass-produced vehicles. The Sherman was adequate for most combat tasks, easy to produce in enormous numbers, simple to maintain in field conditions, and available when and where needed. The Panther and Tiger were magnificent weapons when they worked, but they didn't work often enough. The Tiger I suffered from transmission failures at alarming rates. Approximately 50% of Tigers deployed experienced serious mechanical breakdowns within the first 100 kilometers of combat operations. The Panther's final drive was chronically weak, failing regularly under combat stress. Both tanks required frequent maintenance that consumed hours of crew time and vast quantities of spare parts. By June 1944, when the Allies landed at Normandy, Germany had produced approximately 6,000 Panthers and 1,354 Tigers. America had produced 49,234 M4 Shermans. The numerical disparity was 8-1 for Panthers, 36-1 for Tigers. But those ratios understated the true gap because they counted only vehicles produced, not vehicles operational. On any given day in Normandy, approximately 70% of German heavy tanks were non-operational due to mechanical failure, battle damage, or lack of spare parts. Meanwhile, approximately 90% of American Shermans were operational on any given day. The German High Command fixated on individual combat results, the impressive kill ratios achieved by their heavy armor, while failing to grasp that the strategic equation had already been decided in American factories. They won battles while losing the war of industrial mathematics. July 25, 1944, near St. Lo, Normandy. Operation Cobra begins. SS Hauptsturmführer Ernst Barkmann positions his Panther in a hedgerow, waiting for the American breakout he knows is coming. His tank, number 401 of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, is one of 68 Panthers still operational in the division. 83 Panthers were on strength 2 weeks ago. 15 have been lost, not to enemy action, but to mechanical failure and lack of replacement parts. At 9:38 a.m., the ground begins shaking. Barkmann initially thinks it's an earthquake. Then the sky darkens with bombers, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The hedgerows erupt in fountains of earth and flame as 3,000 Allied aircraft drop 4,000 tons of bombs on a 5-square-mile area. The bombardment lasts 2 hours. When it lifts, Barkmann's radio crackles with panic reports from surviving units. The entire front line has ceased to exist. Through the dust and smoke, Barkmann sees them. Shermans. Dozens of Shermans. Then hundreds of Shermans. They advance in waves, replacing losses immediately, pushing through gaps, bypassing resistance. Behind them, more Shermans. Behind those, even more Shermans. The attack isn't a penetration, it's a flood. Barkmann's crew engages the American tanks with methodical precision. At 200 meters, his gunner destroys the lead Sherman with a single shot. The next Sherman in line simply drives around the burning hulk and continues forward. Barkmann's gunner fires again. Another Sherman explodes. 2 more Shermans drive through the smoke, firing on the move. Their shots miss. The Sherman's gyro stabilizer makes moving fire possible but inaccurate at range, but they're closing distance rapidly. "Reloading," his gunner calls. The Panther's 75mm WK-42 requires manual loading, taking precious seconds. By the time the next round is chambered, 4 more Shermans have appeared. Barkmann destroys a 3rd Sherman at 800 meters. The remaining Shermans spread out, flanking, enveloping. His driver reports movement to the left, 3 more Shermans emerging from a side road. This is the moment Barkman understands the fundamental truth about the Sherman. It doesn't matter that his Panther can destroy them from extreme range. It doesn't matter that his armor shrugs off their 75mm rounds. What matters is that for every Sherman he destroys, 5 more appear. What matters is that the Americans can afford to lose 3 Shermans for every Panther killed and still win the exchange. What matters is that his Panther has 32 rounds of main gun ammunition remaining, and he can see at least 40 Shermans pushing through the breakthrough sector. Barkman's Panther survives this engagement by withdrawing, something German doctrine officially discouraged, but reality increasingly demanded. He destroys 9 Shermans during the fighting withdrawal. American forces later report losing 32 Shermans in this sector during the July 25th attack, but 48 replacement Shermans arrive from depot stocks within 24 hours. The Americans can replace their losses overnight. Barkman's Panther Battalion, having lost 6 Panthers in the day's fighting, will wait 3 weeks for 2 replacement tanks. The pattern repeats across the Normandy front. German heavy tanks achieve impressive individual results, Panthers and Tigers destroying multiple Shermans per engagement, but the Americans simply accept the losses and continue attacking. The mathematics are brutal but simple. If a Panther destroys 3 Shermans before being knocked out or breaking down, but 5 replacement Shermans arrive the next day while the Panther is irreplaceable, the Americans win. Lieutenant Belton Cooper, assigned to the American 3rd Armored Division Maintenance Battalion, witnessed the reality from the other side. His memoir describes the Sherman replacement system with clinical precision. We'd receive 50 replacement Shermans weekly from depot stocks in England. These weren't rebuilt tanks, they were brand new tanks, fresh from American factories, shipped across the Atlantic, unloaded at ports, and driven to forward depots. When a company lost 3 Shermans in combat, 3 replacement tanks would arrive within 48 hours. The crews called it the pipeline, an endless flow of replacement tanks that seemed to have no bottom. I watched German prisoners looking at our depot areas with expressions of absolute disbelief. Hundreds of Shermans parked in neat rows, ready for issue. Mountains of spare parts, replacement engines, new tracks. One captured Panzer officer asked me how many tanks America produced. I told him we'd built about 50,000 Shermans so far. He physically staggered. He said his entire Panzer division had started with 90 tanks. We had 50,000. The logistical implications of the Sherman's design philosophy became apparent during the Normandy campaign. Each Sherman required approximately 4 hours of daily maintenance, routine checks, minor repairs, adjustment. Each Panther required 8 hours daily. Each Tiger required 12 hours. This maintenance burden was manageable for German units in prepared positions with adequate supply. But in fluid combat with extended supply lines, the difference became catastrophic. American tank units operated with organic maintenance companies equipped to perform complete engine swaps in field conditions. The Sherman's modular power pack, engine, transmission, and differential assembled as a single unit could be unbolted, lifted out by crane, and replaced with a fresh power pack in 3 to 4 hours. The new power pack came pre-tested and ready to operate. German tanks required partial disassembly for major component replacement, taking days or weeks. More critically, Sherman parts were interchangeable across the entire production run. A transmission from a Sherman built in Detroit in 1942 would fit a Sherman built in California in 1944. German production, pursuing constant improvement and using multiple manufacturers with different specifications, created nightmares of incompatibility. A Panther built by Mahan required different parts than a Panther built by Daimler-Benz. Tiger parts from Henschel didn't always fit Tigers from Porsche. The pursuit of perfection created logistical chaos. The fuel consumption gap was equally decisive. In sustained combat operations, a Sherman consumed approximately 1.5 gallons per mile cross-country. A Panther consumed 2.8 gallons per mile. A Tiger consumed 4.0 gallons per mile. For a unit advancing 50 miles, a typical day's progress during the breakout, this meant Shermans required 75 gallons per tank, while Tigers required 200 gallons. Multiply by unit strength, and the Germans needed 3 times the fuel tonnage to move the same distance. By August 1944, German Panzer units in Normandy were essentially immobile due to fuel shortages. American fighter bombers had destroyed much of the fuel transport capacity, but equally significant was the simple reality that German logistics couldn't sustain their heavy armor in mobile warfare. Panthers and Tigers sat in defensive positions, not by choice but by necessity. They lacked fuel to maneuver. The Sherman's advantage in numbers manifested most clearly during the Falaise Pocket encirclement in August 1944. German forces attempting to escape the pocket faced American and British armor from multiple directions. Individual German tanks, particularly the remaining Panthers and Tigers, achieved locally impressive results. But they were overwhelmed by numbers, destroyed by artillery and air attack when they stopped to engage, or abandoned when they ran out of fuel. Oberleutnant Rudolf von Ribbentrop, commanding a Tiger company attempting to break out of the pocket, recorded the experience in his after-action report. "We engaged American armor throughout August 19th, destroying 17 Shermans in running battles, but more Shermans kept appearing. When we stopped to fight, they encircled us. When we moved, they followed. By evening, my company had 3 operational Tigers out of 8. 2 had thrown tracks, 1 had transmission failure, 1 was out of ammunition, 1 had engine trouble. We destroyed 17 enemy tanks, but the Americans seemed to have infinite reserves. My 3 surviving Tigers broke out successfully, but the other 5 had to be destroyed to prevent capture. We killed many enemy tanks, but achieved nothing strategic because they simply replaced their losses immediately. The Falaise Pocket cost Germany approximately 500 tanks of all types. American losses in the same engagement, approximately 200 Shermans destroyed. But within 2 weeks, American tank strength in France was back to pre-battle levels due to replacement flows from depots. German tank strength continued declining for months because replacements either didn't exist or couldn't be transported to units. September 1944. The race across France accelerates into Belgium and approaches the German border. American armored divisions advance on logistics more than combat. Their limiting factor, not enemy resistance, but fuel supply. The Sherman's design advantages compound during mobile warfare. Its reliability, cruising radius of 120 miles versus the Panther's 60 miles, means American tanks can pursue without stopping for mechanical issues. Its fuel efficiency means supply trucks can support advances that would strand German armor. Its standardized parts mean field repairs are measured in hours rather than days. Production numbers tell the story of industrial dominance. By September 1944, American factories are producing 2,000 Shermans monthly across multiple production lines. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, a massive facility built specifically for tank production, completes 1 Sherman every 90 minutes. The Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, matches this pace. Lima, Ohio's tank plant, and Chrysler's Detroit Arsenal add thousands more. Each factory represents industrial capacity Germany cannot match. Detroit Tank Arsenal alone employs 20,000 workers across 3 shifts, 24 hours daily. The facility includes its own foundry, machine shops, assembly lines, and test tracks. Tanks move from raw steel to combat ready in 6 weeks. Quality control ensures interchangeability. A turret built in Detroit fits perfectly on a hull built in Lima. German tank production, by contrast, struggles with dispersed manufacturing, bombed factories, and chronic shortages. Panther production peaks at 380 units monthly in July 1944, then declines as Allied bombing intensifies and raw material shortages worsen. Tiger II production, the follow-on to the Tiger Bars, never exceeds 45 units monthly. Each German heavy tank requires 300,000 man-hours to build versus 10,000 man-hours for a Sherman. The Germans are building masterpieces. The Americans are building mass. The qualitative gap narrows as Sherman variants address German armor advantages. The M4A3E8 Easy 8. Sherman mounts a more powerful 76mm gun capable of penetrating Panther frontal armor at combat ranges. The British Sherman Firefly mounts a 17-pounder gun that can defeat Tiger armor. These upgunned Shermans combine improved firepower with the Sherman's inherent reliability and availability advantages. More significantly, American doctrine evolves to neutralize German armor advantages. Rather than seeking tank versus tank combat, American doctrine emphasizes combined arms, tanks working with infantry, artillery, and air support. When Panthers or Tigers appear, American units call artillery or airstrikes rather than engaging in direct fire duels. The Germans' tactical advantage in armor combat becomes irrelevant when American fighter bombers obliterate their tanks from above. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 demonstrates the cumulative effect of American industrial superiority. Germany commits its last strategic reserve, 28 divisions, including 9 Panzer divisions, to a surprise offensive through the Ardennes. The attack achieves initial success, but the outcome is predetermined by industrial mathematics. German forces commit approximately 2,000 tanks to the offensive, including 45 Tiger IIs, 200 Tiger Is, and 400 Panthers, essentially every operational heavy tank in the Wehrmacht's inventory. American forces initially deploy about 800 tanks to contain the breakthrough, but can call on unlimited reserves. Within 1 week, over 2,000 replacement Shermans moved to the Ardennes from depots in France and England. By December 26th, American tank strength in the sector exceeds German strength, despite higher initial losses. The German offensive stalls not from superior American tanks, but from fuel exhaustion, mechanical breakdowns, and overwhelming American numbers. German tank units run out of fuel within days. Panthers and Tigers break down at catastrophic rates. The cold weather and sustained operation without proper maintenance destroy transmissions, engines, and final drives. By January 1945, Germany has lost approximately 800 tanks in the Bulge offensive. American losses, approximately 730 tanks. But American tank strength is fully restored within weeks. German losses are permanent. Oberst Otto Rehmer, commanding the Führer Brigade during the Bulge, wrote in his post-battle assessment, "We destroyed many American tanks, probably 2 for each of ours lost in direct combat, but combat losses were only part of our tank losses. We lost as many Panthers to mechanical failure as to enemy action. We lost Tigers when they ran out of fuel and had to be destroyed. We lost tanks when recovery vehicles couldn't reach them due to fuel shortages. The Americans, meanwhile, seemed to conjure replacement tanks from nowhere. We'd destroy 10 Shermans blocking a road. Within hours, 20 new Shermans would occupy the same position. It wasn't that we couldn't kill their tanks, we could. It was that killing them didn't matter. They had infinite replacements." The Sherman's mechanical reliability becomes increasingly decisive as the war extends into 1945. German tank units report operational readiness rates below 40% by February 1945. American tank units report operational readiness above 85%. The difference isn't maintenance quality. Both sides have skilled mechanics, but parts availability and design simplicity. When a Sherman breaks down, parts are available and repairs are straightforward. When a Panther breaks down, parts may not exist, and repairs require specialized tools and extensive time. The final campaigns in Germany demonstrate the Sherman's overwhelming numerical advantage. American armored divisions advancing into Germany operate with organic strength of 250-plus tanks. German Panzer divisions defending their homeland field, 30 to 40 operational tanks. The numerical disparity is 6 to 1 or greater. Even when individual German tanks achieve superior combat results, they're overwhelmed by numbers. By April 1945, Germany's heavy tank fleet has essentially ceased to exist. Surviving Panthers and Tigers sit immobilized for lack of fuel. When American units encounter them, the heavy tanks are often abandoned or destroyed by their own crews before combat. The Tigers that terrorized Allied tankers in Normandy are found ditched beside roads throughout Germany, victims not of combat but of mechanical failure, fuel exhaustion, and the impossibility of maintenance without parts. The final production statistics reveal the industrial catastrophe of Germany's armor strategy. Germany produced approximately 6,000 Panthers, 1,354 Tiger Es, and 489 Tiger the Sioux during the entire war, a total of 7,143 heavy tanks. America produced 49,234 M4 Shermans. The numerical advantage was 6-1 for medium heavy tanks, but because Shermans were reliable and German heavy tanks frequently weren't, the operational advantage was closer to 10-1. Moreover, Sherman production continued accelerating through war's end while German production collapsed. In the first quarter of 1945, American factories completed 4,500 Shermans. Germany completed fewer than 800 tanks of all types. The industrial gap that seemed impressive in 1943 had become apocalyptic by 1945. May 8, 1945. The war in Europe ends. German tank factories sit silent, their machinery either destroyed by bombing or seized by advancing armies. In prisoner interrogation camps across Europe, Allied intelligence officers interviewed German tank crews and commanders. The transcripts reveal a consistent pattern. Initial contempt for the Sherman transformed into grudging respect, then horrified understanding that quantity had overwhelmed quality. Hauptmann Hans von Luck, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment, provided one of the most comprehensive assessments during interrogation in June 1945. We mocked the Sherman. Its thin armor, weak gun, tall profile, everything about it suggested inferior design. Our Panthers could destroy them from distances where Shermans couldn't even return effective fire. I personally witnessed engagements where a single Panther destroyed 8 or 9 Shermans without taking damage. We thought we were winning. What we failed to understand was that the Americans never intended to match our tanks 1 for 1. They intended to overwhelm us with numbers, reliability, and logistics. For every Panther my regiment destroyed, 5 Shermans appeared the next day. For every Sherman we killed, we knew they had 10 more in reserve. But for every Panther we lost, replacement might take weeks or months if it came at all. The Sherman wasn't designed to outfight the Panther in single combat. It was designed to be produced in numbers that made single combat results irrelevant, and it worked. By 1945, we faced American tank units that could lose half their strength in battle and be fully replenished within a week. Our units lost half their strength and never recovered. That's how they won. Not through superior tanks, but through superior production. General Major Fritz Bayerlein, former commander of Panzer Lehr Division, was even more direct in his assessment recorded at the Nuremberg Interrogation Center in August 1945. The Americans won the tank war in their factories, not on the battlefield. Yes, our Panthers and Tigers were superior weapons individually, but what good is superiority when the enemy fields 10 tanks for every one of yours? What good is invulnerability when the enemy can afford to sacrifice 3 tanks to destroy one of yours and still gain numerical advantage? We built masterpieces. The Panther was perhaps the best medium tank of the war. The Tiger was a magnificent weapon, but they required specialized production, extensive maintenance, consumed enormous fuel, and couldn't be replaced when lost. The Americans built the Sherman, a merely adequate tank by our standards, and produced it in such numbers that adequacy became dominance. They understood something we didn't. In total war, the best tank is the one you can build by the thousands, that works when needed, and that can be replenished faster than the enemy can destroy it. The most complete acknowledgement came from Heinz Guderian, former Inspector General of Armored Troops, during his May 1945 debriefing by American intelligence. His assessment, preserved in the records of the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, acknowledged the fundamental miscalculation of German armor philosophy. We pursued quality at the expense of quantity, believing that superior design would compensate for inferior numbers. This proved catastrophically wrong against an enemy who could field adequate tanks in overwhelming numbers. The Sherman was adequate for most combat tasks. Its reliability was excellent. Its parts were interchangeable. Its maintenance was simple. These factors, which we dismissed as irrelevant compared to armor thickness and gun penetration, proved decisive. I visited American depot areas in Germany after the surrender. Miles of Shermans, parked in perfect rows, ready for issue. Warehouses full of spare parts, replacement engines, new tracks. The Americans had built an industrial system that treated 30-ton tanks like consumer goods. They could replace an entire armored division's losses in a week. We couldn't replace a single battalion's losses in a month. Our Tiger was superior to 5 Shermans in combat, but the Americans built 50 Shermans for every Tiger. The mathematics were inescapable. We needed to destroy 10 Shermans for every Tiger lost just to maintain parity, but we rarely maintained more than 50% operational readiness with our heavy armor, while the Americans maintained 85% operational readiness. The numbers compounded against us. The greatest error was believing that individual weapon superiority determined victory. In reality, industrial capacity, logistics, reliability, and operational availability determined victory. The Americans understood this. We didn't. They built a tank that was good enough and built it by the tens of thousands. We built tanks that were perfect and built them by the hundreds. They won. Post-war technical analysis by both American and German engineers revealed the full extent of the Sherman's design advantages. A 1946 study by the U.S. Army Ordnance Department compared maintenance requirements. Sherman M4A3. Routine maintenance, 4 hours daily. Engine replacement, 4 hours with power pack. Track replacement, 2 hours per side. Major transmission work, 6 hours. Parts interchangeability, 95% across all variants. Operational readiness, 85 to 90% average. Panther OSF. G, routine maintenance, 8 hours daily. Engine replacement, 24 hours minimum. Track replacement, 4 hours per side. Major transmission work, 40 plus hours. Parts interchangeability, 60% across variants. Operational readiness, 35 to 45% average. The operational readiness gap alone explained much of the Sherman's success. On any given day, an American armored division could field 85% of its authorized tank strength. A German Panzer division could field 40% of its authorized strength. This meant that a nominally equal strength American and German division would actually field American armor superiority of 2 to 1 simply from readiness differences. In 1949, a comprehensive study by the British Operational Research Section analyzed tank effectiveness in Northwest Europe. The study concluded that the Sherman achieved approximately 60% of the Panther's effectiveness in tank versus tank combat. But because Shermans were 8.5 times more numerous than Panthers and twice as likely to be operational when needed, the net combat power advantage favored the Americans by approximately 10 to 1. The study's conclusion, controversial at the time but broadly accepted by historians since, stated, the Sherman won not by being better, but by being available. Availability, in turn, derived from production capacity, reliability, maintainability, and logistical sustainability. These factors, largely invisible during individual engagements, proved more decisive than armor thickness or gun penetration. At a 1952 symposium on armored warfare held at Fort Knox, Kentucky, captured German tank commanders participated alongside their former adversaries. Otto Carius, Germany's most successful tank ace with over 150 kills, provided the final word on the Sherman versus German armor debate. We laughed at the Sherman in 1944. We called them Ronsons, lighters that always lit the first time because they burned when penetrated. We called them Tommy Cookers and joked about how easy they were to destroy. This contempt was genuine. In direct combat, our tanks were superior. But I stopped laughing when I realized that destroying Shermans didn't matter. They just kept coming. You'd kill 3, 5, 8 Shermans in an engagement, and the next day there were more. Meanwhile, when we lost a Tiger, we often never saw a replacement. When we lost a Panther, it might be weeks before a replacement arrived, if one arrived at all. The Americans understood something profound. In industrial war, sustainability beats superiority. A good tank you can build 10,000 of is better than a perfect tank you can build 1,000 of. A reliable tank that's operational 90% of the time is better than a magnificent tank that's operational 40% of the time. A tank that's easy to maintain is better than a tank that requires specialists and rare parts. We built the best tanks in the world. They built enough tanks to win the war. There's a lesson there about military procurement, but it's a lesson we learned too late. By the time we understood that 50,000 adequate tanks beat 5,000 perfect tanks, the war was already lost. The Sherman won because America built it by the tens of thousands, because it worked when needed, and because it could be replaced faster than we could destroy it. That's not the romantic story of tank warfare we'd like to tell, but it's the truth. The final Sherman production total stands, as testament to American industrial capacity, 49,234 units produced between 1942 and 1945. Additional production for Allied nations brought the total to approximately 50,000 tanks. This represented more tanks than all other Allied nations combined produced during the entire war. It represented more medium-heavy tanks than Germany produced of all types during its entire military expansion from 1933 to 1945. The Sherman's service life extended decades beyond the war. Israel used Shermans in combat through the 1973 Yom Kippur War, nearly 30 years after production ended. Chile operated Shermans until 1989. Paraguay used them until 1993. The Sherman fought in Korea, Suez, the Six-Day War, and a dozen smaller conflicts. The Tiger and Panther ended production in 1945 and never fired a shot after war's end. The longevity spoke to the Sherman's fundamental design wisdom, reliability and sustainability over ultimate performance. The Germans built masterpieces that required perfection to function. The Americans built tools that worked in imperfect conditions with imperfect maintenance by imperfect crews. In total war, tools beat masterpieces. June 26, 1944, Villers-Bocage, Normandy. SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann peers through his Tiger's cupola at the column of British Shermans below. He's confident in his tank's superiority. He's correct about that superiority. In the engagement that follows, he'll destroy 25 Allied tanks without taking serious damage. He'll be celebrated as Germany's greatest tank ace. But by December 31st, 1944, Wittmann will be dead, killed by a Sherman Firefly during the battle for Normandy. His Tiger 205 will be replaced by Tiger 007, which will throw a track and break down twice before being knocked out by combined Sherman and artillery fire. The Americans will lose approximately 130 Shermans to Tigers during the Normandy campaign, but they'll replace those Shermans within days, while the Tigers that destroyed them are often irreplaceable. The German Panzer crews who mocked the Sherman's thin armor learned at devastating cost that in industrial warfare, the tank that works beats the tank that's perfect. The tank that's available beats the tank that's superior. And the tank that can be replaced faster than the enemy can destroy it wins wars regardless of individual combat results. Germany produced 7,143 heavy tanks that achieved impressive combat results. America produced 50,000 medium tanks that won the war. The Germans laughed at thin armor and weak guns. The Americans answered with production lines that never stopped, supply chains that never failed, and replacement systems that kept Shermans rolling forward regardless of losses. The mockery died in German factories that couldn't build tanks fast enough, in maintenance depots that lacked replacement parts, and in combat reports that showed German tanks immobilized by mechanical failure, while American tanks, mediocre but reliable, advanced inexorably toward Berlin. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II, but it was the tank that was there when needed, in the numbers needed, working when needed. And in the end, that's what won.